from around the world has given us a tremendous advantage over other nations.
For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. For a special report, we go to Washington, where President Barack Obama is addressing the nation.
People not trapped by our past, but able to remake ourselves as we choose. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Families who enter our country the right way and play by the rules watch others flout the rules. Business owners who offer their workers good wages and benefits see the competition exploit undocumented immigrants by paying them far less. All of us take offense to anyone who reaps the rewards of living in America without taking on the responsibilities of living in America. And undocumented immigrants who desperately want to embrace those responsibilities see little option but to remain in the shadows or risk their families being torn apart. It's been this way for decades. And for decades, we haven't done much about it. When I took office, I committed to fixing this broken immigration system. And I began by doing what I could to secure our borders. Today, we have more agents and technology deployed to secure our southern border than at any time in our history. And over the past 6 years, illegal border crossings have been cut by more than half. Although this summer there was a brief spike in unaccompanied children being apprehended at our border, the number of such children is now actually lower than it's been in nearly 2 years. Overall, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is at its lowest level since the 1970s. Those are the facts. Meanwhile, I worked with Congress on a comprehensive fix. And last year, 68 Democrats, Republicans, and independents came together to pass a bipartisan bill in the Senate. It wasn't perfect. It was a compromise. But it reflected common sense. It would have doubled the number of Border Patrol agents while giving undocumented immigrants a pathway to citizenship if they paid a fine, started paying their taxes, and went to the back of the line. And independent experts said that it would help grow our economy and shrink our deficits. Had the House of Representatives allowed that kind of bill a simple yes or no vote, it would have passed with support from both parties. And today it would be the law. But for a year and a half now, Republican leaders in the House have refused to allow that simple vote. Now, I continue to believe that the best way to solve this problem is by working together to pass that kind of common sense law. But until that happens, there are actions I have the legal authority to take as president, the same kinds of actions taken by Democratic and Republican presidents before me, that will help make our immigration system more fair and more just. Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. First, we'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. Second, I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy, as so many business leaders have proposed. Third, we'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country. I want to say more about this third issue because it generates the most passion and controversy. Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. That's why over the past 6 years, deportations of criminals are up 80%. And that's why we're going to keep focusing enforcement resources on actual threats to our security. Felons, not families. Criminals, not children. Gang members, not a mom who's working hard to provide for her kids. We'll prioritize, just like law enforcement does every day. But even as we focus on deporting criminals, the fact is millions of immigrants in every state, of every race and nationality, still live here illegally. And let's be honest, tracking down, rounding up, and deporting millions of people isn't realistic. Anyone who suggests otherwise isn't being straight with you. It's also not who we are as Americans. After all, most of these immigrants have been here a long time. They work hard, often in tough, low-paying jobs. They support their families. They worship at our churches. Many of their kids are American-born or spent most of their lives here. And their hopes, dreams, and patriotism are just like ours. As my predecessor, President Bush, once put it, they are a part of American life. Now, here's the thing. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. So we're going to offer the following deal. If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you have children who are American citizens or legal residents, if you register, pass a criminal background check, and you're willing to pay your fair share of taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. That's what this deal is. Now let's be clear about what it isn't. This deal does not apply to anyone who has come to this country recently. It does not apply to anyone who might come to America illegally in the future. It does not grant citizenship or the right to stay here permanently or offer the same benefits that citizens receive. Only Congress can do that. All we're saying is we're not going to deport you. I know some of the critics of this action call it amnesty. Well, it's not. Amnesty is the immigration system we have today. Millions of people who live here without paying their taxes or playing by the rules, while politicians use the issue to scare people and whip up votes at election time. That's the real amnesty, leaving this broken system the way it is. Mass amnesty would be unfair. Mass deportation would be both impossible and contrary to our character. What I'm describing is accountability, a common-sense middle ground approach. If you meet the criteria, you can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill. I want to work with both parties to pass a more permanent legislative solution. And the day I sign that bill into law, the actions I take will no longer be necessary. Meanwhile, don't let a disagreement over a single issue be a deal breaker on every issue. That's not how our democracy works. And Congress certainly shouldn't shut down our government again just because we disagree on this. Americans are tired of gridlock. What our country needs from us right now is a common purpose, a higher purpose. Most Americans support the types of reforms I've talked about tonight, but I understand the disagreements held by many of you at home. Millions of us, myself included, go back generations in this country with ancestors who put in the painstaking work to become citizens. So we don't like the notion that anyone might get a free pass to American citizenship. I know some worry immigration will change the very fabric of who we are, or take our jobs, or stick it to middle-class families at a time when they already feel like they've gotten the raw deal for over a decade. I hear those concerns. But that's not what these steps would do. Our history and the facts show that immigrants are a net plus for our economy and our society. And I believe it's important that all of us have this debate without impugning each other's character. Because for all the back and forth of Washington, we have to remember that this debate is about something bigger. It's about who we are as a country and who we want to be for future generations. Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law? Or are we a nation that gives them a chance to make amends, take responsibility, and give their kids a better future? Are we a nation that accepts the cruelty of ripping children from their parents' arms? Or are we a nation that values families and works together to keep them together? Are we a nation that educates the world's best and brightest in our universities only to send them home to create businesses in countries that compete against us? Or are we a nation that encourages them to stay and create jobs here, create businesses here, create industries right here in America? That's what this debate is all about. We need more than politics as usual when it comes to immigration. We need reasoned, thoughtful, compassionate debate that focuses on our hopes, not our fears. I know the politics of this issue are tough, but let me tell you why I have come to feel so strongly about it. Over the past years, I've seen the determination of immigrant fathers who worked 2 or 3 jobs without taking a dime from the government and at risk any moment of losing it all just to build a better life for their kids. I've seen the heartbreak and anxiety of children whose mothers might be taken away from them just because they didn't have the right papers. I've seen the courage of students who, except for the circumstances of their birth, are as American as Malia or Sasha, students who bravely come out as undocumented in hopes they could make a difference in the country they love. These people, our neighbors, our classmates, our friends, they did not come here in search of a free ride or an easy life. They came to work and study and serve in our military, and above all, contribute to America's success. Now, tomorrow I'll travel to Las Vegas and meet with some of these students, including a young woman named Astrid Silva. Astrid was brought to America when she was 4 years old. Her only possessions were a cross, her doll, and the frilly dress she had on. When she started school, she didn't speak any English. She caught up to other kids by reading newspapers and watching PBS. And she became a good student. Her father worked in landscaping. Her mom cleaned other people's homes. They wouldn't let Astrid apply to a technology magnet school, not because they didn't love her, but because they were afraid the paperwork would out her as an undocumented immigrant. So she applied behind their back and got in. Still, she mostly lived in the shadows until her grandmother, who visited every year from Mexico, passed away. And she couldn't travel to the funeral without risk of being found out and deported. It was around that time she decided to begin advocating for herself and others like her. And today, Astrid Silva is a college student working on her 3rd degree. Are we a nation that kicks out a striving, hopeful immigrant like Astrid? Or are we a nation that finds a way to welcome her in? Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too. My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too. And whether our forebears were strangers who crossed the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Rio Grande, we are here only because this country welcomed them in and taught them that to be an American is about something more than what we look like or what our last names are or how we worship. What makes us Americans is our shared commitment to an ideal, that all of us are created equal, and all of us have the chance to make of our lives what we will. That's the country our parents and grandparents and generations before them built for us. That's the tradition we must uphold. That's the legacy we must leave for those who are yet to come. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless this country we love.
U.S. President Barack Obama laying out his plans for immigration reform in the country. He will enact these measures through executive action. The president will travel to Nevada tomorrow to sign these proposals. Meanwhile, his plans to bypass Congress sets up a pending clash with Republicans. Tonight, the president is striking a pragmatic tone, even making a reference to former President George Bush. He laid out his plan. He will allow immigrants who have been in the United States for over 5 years to apply for to defer their deportation. Also, immigrants who have U.S. children can also have their deportations deferred. We're now going to go to some analysis. We're joined by Prerna Lal. Prerna is the founder of the Dream Activist, an online advocacy network led by undocumented youth. It is one of the most important movements that has been formed in the past few years to defend the rights of young undocumented migrants. She was also once an undocumented immigrant herself. Today she is a U.S. permanent resident. Prerna, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to start...
Thank you for joining me too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I wanted to start, you have followed and you have worked with the undocumented community for a long time now. I'm sure you know some of these 5 million people who these new measures will affect. It basically relieves them of some fear of being deported and in many cases separated from their family. What does this mean for them and what's going through their heads tonight?
Well, it's important to recognize that this is a grassroots victory, that we have had undocumented students, undocumented workers, undocumented parents who have organized for this change, who have chained themselves to detention centers and buses deporting people to ask the president to stop these deportations because the president has deported 2 million people in 6 years. And this is definitely a response to all our work and all our demands that the president stop deporting people who are just as American, who contribute to this country. And while we welcome this news, I think the White House and our analysts are projecting that this will help 4.3 million of the 11.8 million undocumented immigrants. That still leaves much of our community without help, without relief. So we'll welcome this victory tonight and we'll welcome this change, but we'll keep fighting for more.
About that, depending on who you ask, 11 million undocumented immigrants live in the United States. So this measure, along with being temporary, leaves 6 million people still at risk of deportation. So as a former undocumented immigrant yourself, explain to us what it's like for them to constantly live with that fear of being deported, and they will continue to live with that fear.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, as an undocumented immigrant myself, I was undocumented for 15 years of my life until I was able to get my papers just 3 months ago, actually. And now I'm an immigration attorney in this country. It's like my potential has completely changed. You know, my earning potential as well as my contribution to the society is very different now than it was 3 months ago. And as for people who are still undocumented, you know, they pay taxes, they have families here. And if you're undocumented, you can't really work legally. You're subject to detention and deportation at any time. And it's a lot of stress and also a lot of trauma. And most importantly, people can't actually leave the country to travel abroad and see their families abroad because, you know, they'll be subject to a 10-year bar. So basically, for such a long time, a lot of people have been effectively detained in the U.S. border because they actually can't leave because they have children here. Why would anyone leave their children here and go abroad, never to see them again? So it's actually, I mean, we welcome this announcement, definitely, but we also want to push for more change from the president and to be sure to fight against, you know, the enforcement that will take place against the 6 million people who will be left out of this. And we're talking about undocumented workers with no families here. We're talking about a lot of LGBT individuals who don't necessarily have children here. The announcement doesn't benefit anyone who doesn't have, say, children as of today, who has lived here for a long time. These are valuable members of our community. These are the people who put food, you know, on our tables, who are migrant workers, and we need to protect them just as much as we are protecting the parents of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents.
So it will be a question of who qualifies, Prayer. Now, if you'll stay with us, we're going to go now to some more information. Undocumented immigrants in the United States really come from around the world. but certain regions stand out as the main origins of those who wish to remain in the United States. Take a look.
According to the State Department of National Security, in 2012, there were 11.4 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. The great majority come from Central America. Mexicans make up 59% of this population, while 6% come from El Salvador, 5% from Guatemala, and 3% from Honduras. Away from Central America, the Philippines is next in line as one of the principal origins of undocumented immigrants in the United States and account for 3% of that population. Within the United States, 25% of undocumented immigrants live in California, 16% in Texas, and 6% in Florida. Meanwhile, both New York and Illinois have 10% of the total population of undocumented immigrants in the United States.
Okay, back with Prerna Law with more analysis. Prerna, Republicans have promised to attack these plans through any means that they can. They could use their new majority in Congress to try to retract funding for the president's plans. They could also sue the president. And we've also heard more talk of they could possibly shut down the federal government again. So how much do you worry that Republicans could find some success with that and some of these plans that the president announced could be reversed?
I wouldn't worry about the president's legal authority or the success of any lawsuit, because every president since Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, has issued an executive order or done some sort of executive action to allow certain people to live in this country. So any lawsuit is really on flimsy ground. The president is on solid legal footing to expand upon the program that he issued for children like 2 years ago to parents as well. So there's no issue on that front. It'll be a waste of taxpayer money, essentially. As for the Republicans shutting down the government, it's kind of contrary. That's the ultimate amnesty. And I'll tell you why. Because that means less money for enforcement. That means that E-Verify, a program that tracks undocumented workers, won't work. That means our immigration courts won't have money to prosecute and deport people. So Republicans have to think really twice about what they really do when they shut down the government. They shut down the enforcement arm. They shut down the detention arm. And so a lot more undocumented immigrants would be actually free. So it's really contrary. So these threats are really, I'm telling you, like empty threats. And I'm sure that the president is going to succeed in pushing this through just as much as he's been able to push through the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that he issued 2 years ago.
Okay, we're also going to take a look, Prerna, to some of social networks. What we're seeing this evening, we've been asking our viewers thoughts on Obama's plans. We asked for what impact they thought these measures would have on the lives of millions of undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. And if we take a look to some of the tweets we have received, Ernest Correa tweeted that he thinks a major change for immigrants is needed, but he does not think Obama will go for it. Juan Luis Nirua tweeted that though they work hard, undocumented immigrants are underpaid. This is critical to the current system, and he doesn't think anything will happen. Jack Bravo tweeted that he thinks Barack Obama, his administration, continues defrauding its citizens and that it will fail to change things with the hashtag immigration reform. And Manu F. Diaz tweeted to Telesur English that there is nothing Obama can do that will end the systematic discrimination against migrants fostered by all U.S. governments. And Prerna, what do you think about Obama's decision to use executive action, and how will that possibly affect the chances of Congress and the president passing long-term immigration reform in the next 2 years? Is there any chance of that now?
I believe the president is acting because Congress has failed to act. And it's also important to realize that the president has acted, right? The president has acted to deport 2 million people over the past 6 years. That's all an action, and this is just one of those actions. Like, he's now prioritizing who to remove. He wants to remove felons instead of families, and he is within his authority to do just that. Now, as for whether this will lead to a showdown. We have different, analysis on this because we have a 2016 election, and if the Republicans want to win the Latino vote or the Asian vote, they cannot be shutting down the government. They can't appear to be anti-immigrant, and they have to come to the table. So this is actually a brilliant, brilliant move by the president that ensures that we have a down payment on legislation at some point in the future. And even if we don't, we do get at least 4 million more people who will be protected.
All right, Prerna Law, thank you so much for joining us and for that analysis. So we're going to move on. Policies like these will, of course, affect millions of lives. They will also leave millions still at risk of being deported. We're now going to invite you to continue watching the documentary Limbo. It explores the hardships faced by immigrants deported from the United States, most of them Mexican, then deported. They end up in the border city of Tijuana. That's where most of them live trapped in a life of misery, repression, and often falling into addiction. Take a look. The lives affected by the immigration policies enacted in Washington.